Hello and welcome back to the second of two video lectures for Module 9 on business reports. And here we're going to briefly look at formal and informal reports, informational reports, analytical reports. These are also known as case studies, and no matter how you define them, they typically have the same sort of idea and purpose. The two types are the formal reports and the informal reports. Now, a formal report has a title page, a letter of transmittal, and that's the one that I talked about. That's a document that accompanies and explains what the document is all about, the reader's considerations, what are some of the main points and the main conclusions, and thanking the not only the reader, but the person that allowed this project to begin in the first place. That's important, especially in the business world, because you wish to identify the individuals that are responsible for not the generating of the report, but the generating of the idea that a report is necessary. So it is there that you would thank those people. So it's a good habit to get into, to just identify the reasons why the report came into being in the first place. And of course, the table of contents is very important. Now, informal reports could be considered letters and memos, emails as well. It could be a fill-in-the-blank report, like checking off certain boxes. It could be a template of something where you simply just fill in information. So it's informal in the sense that it doesn't require a tremendous amount of creativity to put it together. It is a template that simply needs to be filled out. But in this case here, you will be closer to writing a formal report for this class, as opposed to an informal report, which is more on the lines of a template that needs to be completed or a letter or memo that needs to be sent out. Okay, so we've decided that this is a formal report with particular formal aspects like a title page, a table of contents, a letter of transmittal, an introduction, a conclusion, all these different things. Now, even over and above that, what kind of report is it? Is it an information report? Are you collecting data on behalf of the reader? Are you sort of scanning the literature, as they say, to retrieve information and bring that under one roof, as it were, in your report? It could be an analytical report as well. So you're collecting information, but secondly, you're analyzing it. You're trying to interpret the data, and you are simply presenting the data to someone to make up their minds about something. So that differs from an information report because there's a second step, right? You collect information, you collate it and compile it together, and you analyze it. Now, the third one takes that third step. So it is both informational or descriptive, it's analytical, but it also is evaluative because it will now include recommendations. And the recommendations can be under the title recommendations or under conclusions. But there's three things going on. There is a descriptive aspect where the information is collected and described. It's analytical or interpretive because it interprets that data, looks for consistencies or anomalies. It's looking for patterns that will allow the reader to see that there is a certain sameness kind of across the board with the information that's been collected. But a recommendation report goes one step further. It then evaluates the data. It just doesn't interpret it. It evaluates it. And it makes a judgment, right? It makes a value judgment about which source may be better than another, or it says based on our analysis of the material or of the data, we recommend, we recommend the following action. So that's essentially what the three types are. Now, for this particular task or this project, you are primarily creating an information report. Now, certainly you can analyze and interpret the data if that is the nature of the work, but certainly at the very least, you're going to collect data for the reader. And you will provide some degree of interpretation for sure, but the last step is not as important in terms of the final goal of the project. There could be recommendations, and certainly if you believe that that is necessary, please do, especially if it's something that's designed to change people's actions, right, their daily actions, or to change their minds about something, right? Those would include recommendations. And yes, you can make a value judgment about the ideas that you have generated from your interpretation. Okay, so I said we have information reports. There are also closure reports, and these are reports that are very clear in their scope. They summarize completed work and research that doesn't necessarily result in recommendations and actions, just essentially like I've just said. So information reports are really the kinds of reports that students write in this course. Right? For this communication course, it is primarily information gathering and, to a certain degree, some degree of interpretation. So the purpose and the scope, the purpose of the report, right? What aspects are covered, it really depends on the topic you choose, and more importantly, the main thesis. What will you do with this material? Now, once you collect that information and you collate it and you look at it, you need to present it in some kind of reasonable or logical fashion. So one of the ways in which you can do it is in a chronological fashion. And you can do that by looking at the dates of the articles that you are going to use, that you've either collected from Google Scholar or from the digital library, wherever that may be. And so the chronological account will be based on the articles that you have found, and you can sort of lay them end to end and see whether there is a consistent pattern, a development of one sort or another, where the issue started off, maybe sort of as an anomaly. And all of a sudden that anomaly, that one-time thing, kind of starts happening more often. So the chronological account will depict how this one-time anomaly becomes a pattern that is consistent and measurable. So again, depending on what you are writing about, that chronological account can look at that. But it is how the problem was discovered, what may have been done at one point, or maybe the problem was ignored, right? That's still part of the chronology, because if the problem was ignored, it has now become a worse problem. And that is also something you need to identify. So when you've finished all of that, you still have your concluding paragraph and suggestions if you think that they are necessary, recommendations also for later action. And so the concluding paragraph will try to sort of recontextualize this pattern that you have seen grow over the series of articles that you've read and looked at, to see whether there has been an addressing of the problem right from the very beginning, and the problem either got out of hand, or it could have been ignored or downplayed, or maybe the problem ended up being sort of not the cause, but maybe one of the symptoms of something deeper, etc., etc. All these kinds of things are part of that chronological structure of information. So recommendation reports include, of course, lots of information, lots of analyses and interpretation, but it is also a kind of recommendation. Here's what I think we should do, right? And so it's something that is still worthwhile to present in a paper if the nature of the work allows that to happen. So in the business world, rather than the academic world, which is where you're at right now, you're going to be writing things in the business world, that could be information only, right? Sales reports. This is more a statistical presentation, not an analysis, right? But information only is still simply the presentation of statistics. Information plus analysis, right, would be an annual report or an auditing report where you present that statistical information and then you analyze it. You're looking for trends, downward or upward, or stationary. Not a stationary trend, a steady trend, my mistake. So information only, just the stats. Information plus analysis, stats plus interpretation. And the third one, again, just like the descriptive, interpretive, and evaluative reports, we have information plus analysis plus a recommendation, or at least an evaluation of the data, right? An evaluation of the interpretation that the writer or writers, a group of writers, have basically devised from the collection of the data. So the last one, the information plus analysis plus recommendation, it could be a feasibility report or justification report. Looking at the data, looking at the trends, moving one way or the other, we recommend the following. The moment you see we recommend the following, that's a value judgment, right? Because you have looked at material, you have interpreted the material, and gone one step further. You have now evaluated that interpretation, right? You take that final step. So feasibility reports and justification reports are often done in businesses where something needs to be figured out. Like, we have a problem, do we expand our workforce? Do we reallocate money? Do we rebudget, something? Do we go back to zero? Do we hit the reset buttons and start all over again? Whatever the recommendation is from the report, this is what the individuals who are identified in the letter of transmittal is saying, thank you to so-and-so, Mr. and Mrs. X, for allowing us to do this report. They are really the person you're writing to, right? They're the person that is going to read the report and act on your recommendations. And hopefully they will be good ones. So no matter what, whether information, whether it's descriptive, interpretive, or evaluative, writing a report is going to involve the same thing, which is project management. And I know some of you are studying this, so this would be right up your alley. So, individual or team, in this case for this year, as I mentioned before, this will be an individual effort. You will not be working with teams simply because it will be too difficult to put a team together. I would rather have students work on their own. Okay, so you need careful planning. You want to manage your resources. You want to make sure that you meet the audience's needs within a proper time frame, which in this case is Thursday, August the 5th, 11:59 p.m. You want to make sure that the personnel, financial, legal, ethical, okay, those things not so important in a report from a student, but in the business world, absolutely. Because here, the person that has given you the mandate to draw up this report is going to expect you to finish it within a certain period of time, using a certain budget. You want it to be financially sound, legally and ethically sound, because you don't want to be accused of stealing from someone or plagiarizing from someone else. Those things are important because that report gets filed. And sometimes all kinds of people might have a chance to read that report after the fact. Once the person who is identified as the main reader or readers, typically someone that will be above them, upper management or the CEO, whoever it is, once that person is done with the report, it may be filed away, never to be looked at again, or it could be passed on to someone else, especially in the accounts department. Let's say the feasibility study is on reallocating funds. Once that report is done, it's presented to the proper prospective reader. That reader may turn around and now pass that on to someone else. So what I'm saying is, you don't want to slam the accounts department for being, shoddy or mismanaged, because guess what? They may be the ones who read it next. They're going to say, well, I don't think you're much of a writer. So be careful. Keep in mind who might potentially be writing it. The problem could still be in the accounts department, but there are different ways of presenting that information that isn't a personal attack, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so you've sat down and you figured out what kind of report this is. You want to define the purpose of the report, assess your resources. Are you looking in Google Scholar, the digital library? Are you looking for local newspapers, local media, because you want a kind of a local flavor on this very important issue? Again, it really depends, right? All those things will define the scope, right, of the report, and as a result, the kinds of information that you should be looking for. The accessing of data, there is tons and tons of information out there that is of varying quality. I would stay away from blogs unless you want to use it as a counterexample, but you want to go with scholarly material, peer-reviewed articles. And again, we'll talk about this in more detail. Now, here it says who is responsible for what tasks. Again, in this case, it will be the single individual writer, the student, the single writer, who will be responsible for all of this material. So that's why when you set up a 4-week timeline, which is roughly what you want to be doing for this particular report, be mindful of what needs to be done and try to sort of stay on task as much as you can, because if that's the case, the likelihood of being able to finish it is that much higher. Okay, if you were to break it down in terms of research versus writing, you'll find that you'll spend roughly half of, let's say, a week and a half to 2 weeks analyzing your data, writing and revising the draft, and shaping it, reshaping it, and then at least thinking about visuals and slides. Now, I'm going to stress this now, and I will remind you again. your PowerPoint presentation, which will be the last thing you need to do, is based on this report. It will not be a brand new thing. This entire second half is scaffolded to one thing, which is the research report. You've already handed in a proposal. I will respond to it. The next thing is a heads up, which is 2 weeks later, which is not due for another 2 weeks. Then there's also the final report itself. And then the very last, the fourth part, is a PowerPoint presentation based on the report. So you're not going to cut and paste every single paragraph. You're going to sort of distill it into about a 5-10 minute presentation maximum, right? Between 5 to 7 minutes, I think, is more than enough. But as you are working through this material, and if you find really good visuals, hold on to them. Hold on to them and use them both in your report and in your PowerPoint presentations. So as you're working through the first couple of weeks and you're beginning to collect this information and you're getting your ideas down on paper, you're shaping them to something you're happy with, keep that in mind, because the first half is generally that kind of work. Now, in the second half, you want to sort of look at your ideas more carefully, your interpretations, making sure that you have covered the topic properly. You're not looking necessarily at controversial topics where you need to necessarily present an opposing viewpoint and be fair and balanced in that sense. You're not writing about capital punishment, pro and con, or abortion or something else. You're looking at an issue that is timely, that is part of your business world, and you're looking at it from a sense of passion, right? You really care about this subject. So what you present doesn't necessarily have to be, both sides of the issue, because there are certain issues now that clearly have a right and wrong perspective. And climate change is one of them. You don't have to necessarily present, the opposing side. Where it does become really useful is, let's say, again, I'm sorry to keep using climate change as an example, but it's a good one. Let's say in climate change, you get specific instances where local politicians, and I say local in that area, who vote down a proposal to do something about climate change, to cap emissions or a carbon tax. And that's something that is counterintuitive to solving the global, the climate change issue. So that's not necessarily presenting the opposing side in a fair and balanced way. What it is indicating instead is that there are certain people that still willingly and unyieldingly refuse to budge on this position. And if they're politicians, very likely their pockets are being lined by oil companies and oil lobbies. And so you can still bring that in, because it still indicates to you that, hey, we have a long way to go, because there are very powerful lobby groups, whether they're in Washington or Ottawa or Mumbai, wherever they may be, wherever you are, that are doing quite the opposite. So it's up to you whether you want to indicate it. But certainly if there's a concerted effort on behalf of either media and politicians to downplay a certain issue, let's say the pandemic response, right, to COVID-19, if you were going to write on that, those would be clearly things you wish to present, which do not paint the opposing side in very favorable terms, but unfortunately, it's the reality, right? So you can look at it that way, and it is important. So upfront planning, you can keep working on it and shaping it. You've got lots of time. Okay, here, talk to your readers and understand how much detail and formality they want. What I'm explaining to you right now is give me enough information for me to understand the importance of your thesis. If there are specific words that are, or words that are specific to your field, please define them. You don't have to interpret them, just define them. Let me know what those things mean. So for example, if I'm going to write a paper and I'm going to use the word dialectics, well, there's lots of different versions. So I will say I'm using the dialectics that are referring to Plato or Marx or Hegel or Lukács. Or don't worry if this means nothing to you. That's not the point. The point is, when you are writing something that is very specific to a field, you need to be clear on how you use the terminology. So if you're going to talk to readers to understand how much detail and formality they want, yes, keep it formal in the ways that I've shown you, but think about the fact that you may need to explain something to me for me to understand how exactly you're going to take this idea and kind of run with it, right? And use it as a focus of your paper. So you want to review and go through, and you want to edit and reshape and reshape, all the time thinking of the main purpose of your paper. What is my main thesis? Do all of these paragraphs aim towards the same end? Is it a means to an end to get to this solution? And if the answer is yes, you're well on your way. The audience, myself, I'm interested. I want to know more about it, but be mindful of the fact that there may be things that I don't know about really well. Okay, so last couple things here. The chronological pattern, which is this sort of historical development of a particular situation. You can summarize this progress. You can present it to us in such a way that you might take us up to the present day. And so let's say the first page of the paper is a brief history / overview of this problem, going back however many years you need to go. And your paper now will pick up kind of in the present day and follow through from there. That's still chronological. But now in terms of the structure, right, you want to summarize that progress in terms of goals. We're thinking of the project itself, not the topic or the content necessarily. You want to make sure that as you are getting to this is in a couple of weeks when you have a kind of a heads up report or a status report. This is kind of really what we're talking about here. The chronology is not the body paragraphs. This is the chronology of the paper itself, right? The research report. So in a couple of weeks, when I ask you for a status report, this is what you're going to look at. We'll look at this some more. You want to summarize the progress where you're at in terms of your goals and the original schedule. I'm on schedule. I may be off schedule, but I plan on getting back to it. Number 2, under the heading work completed, describe what you've done so far. And then there'll be work to be completed. Now, I will give you some examples so you know exactly what I mean. But basically, you're telling me, in terms of my 4-week structure, my time frame, here's where I'm at. Here's what I've managed to do. Here's the work I've completed. Here's what I need to complete. And just let me know. I expect to be able to finish a final draft roughly a week before it's due, have a chance to reread it and make any corrections that I need to at that point. And it will be delivered on time. So that's essentially what the status report is, which is what we're describing right here. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about here is just the APA style. Again, if you are more comfortable with MLA, please use MLA. Be consistent. But here, and I think both MLA and APA, these ideas that I'm going to present to you here are very valid. Because when you are about to go into a quotation or go into a paraphrase or summary, it's kind of nice to say, not just, writes, you can say points out, suggests, emphasizes, claims, argues, contends. Now, contends, just even that, okay, contends as opposed to just states. Okay, so states, there's a degree of confidence in that. Contends that, maybe there's a little bit of doubt in your mind that what that person's saying is in fact 100% correct, right? It's certainly true, but maybe they're missing something. So if you say that so-and-so, Sahid, contends that for whatever it may be, then go on and say, however, upon further research, something else is important. So those words, those verbs that really talk about how a writer presents a thought, points out, suggests, discovers, claims, argues, believes, alleges, all these things. Each one of those words have a slightly different connotation, right? They suggest something slightly different about the fact that it is simply just writes or states. Think about that, especially if you're going to set up something verbatim. You've found a quotation in a text that is really good, but what you want to do is you want to attack it. So what you do is you say, well, so-and-so contends or alleges that the earth is flat, alleges that climate change is a fiction. So-and-so claims that COVID-19 doesn't exist. It's a plot by the government to set up 5G towers and blah, 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 whatever it is. All those things allow you to set up a contrast because suggests, claims, contends, alleges, implies that you're about to move in a slightly different direction. States with confidence that. wow, okay, that person really is, he's got it figured out. But if you write something like alleges or contends, you're implying to the reader that you're about to take what that person has just said and either change it, question it, reinterpret it, but do something with it. It isn't just going to get dropped in the paragraph and then move on. You're going to set up something, a contrast of one sort, to either contend yourself, right? Reinterpret yourself. All those things really matter. Again, we'll talk more about that because it has a lot to do with setting up arguments. This is where writing logically really comes in handy. And again, logic it's got nothing to do with mathematics. What it has to do with is cause and effect. If you see those words alleges, I'm thinking in the back of my mind that you are about to contradict that person or correct them or tell me that they're straight up lying, right? So those words really have some connotations. Now, the final thing with APA, I want to show you this, in-text citations, and I cannot stress this enough. Please, 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 please have in-text citations. When you borrow something from someone, it isn't enough just to put them in a works cited page. Show me in the body paragraphs where you use that particular thinker. And so you do it by using what's called in-text citations. And they look something like this, right? Yanofsky and Yanofsky, brackets 2002, have explained. And here alleges, contends, states with confidence, asserts, avows, avert, whatever. It doesn't matter. And at the end of the statement, page number, right there. Now, this will come up in Turnitin, and it will light up like a Christmas tree. And when I read through it, if I see that you've cited it and you've given that citation a name in terms of Yanofsky, it could be whoever, and you've given me proper citation, no problem. I will go over, carry on and say, yep, there it is. This is good. But make sure that whatever I see in the in-text citation, because that'll come up through Turnitin, that I also see it in your list of references. Whether you want to call it list of references, bibliography, works cited, it doesn't matter to me. But you need to have that page and make sure that these articles, this one by Yanofsky and Yanofsky in 2002, I see here because I see you use it in your in-text body paragraphs. And it's that simple. So when you're using those, identify where you use it in the body paragraphs and make sure that it is referenced in the works cited page. And that's essentially it. So there are two other PowerPoint slides. One is basically a visual breakdown of the structure of a research report. Please have a look at that. And there's also some information on APA citations. I'm not going to make a video on that because it's just a lot of words. I would rather have you just have a look at it. If you're comfortable with APA citation and you understand the format, then you don't even need to look at them. But I won't make a video for those, but do have a look at them if you're not 100% sure. Now, in the meantime, that's it. I will finish up and I will see you in a few days. Take care.